Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today is going to be the last episode of our parallax scrolling effect, part 1. So basically at the end of this episode, we're going to be able to create these kind of scrolling effects and parallax effects. So you're going to see that we have this effect over here, and then the sort of the slogan or the text comes up. And then if I scroll down, you'll see that the image comes here, and then this sort of text of that image also comes up. And also take a look at here. When I scroll down, this will move with a different speed than the other elements in the page. So you can see that it kind of has this very cool floating effect. And then when you scroll down, you're going to see the next text coming up. And then you also have this one, which also moves with a different speed than the other elements in the page. And ultimately, if you notice here, we have this kind of cool sort of parallax background image effect, as you can see over here. So going ahead again, you have this effect, then you're gonna have this, and then you're gonna have this kind of cool effect. All right, so in the first part of the last episode, we're gonna go ahead and only create the HTML and CSS for today, and tomorrow we're going to add the effects that we introduced in the previous episodes. And that tutorial is going to be a super quick tutorial because we already have the code. And at the time of doing that tutorial, I'm going to tell you which tutorial it is. So if you haven't watched it, you can go ahead and watch them. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and do. We are having really cool and awesome tutorials coming up next. So let's get started. Without further ado, I go to kotus.com, and then the front end section, since I'm using our online editor, but you can obviously use any editor that you want. So in the HTML, first things I'm going to do, I'm going to define a container, a div with class container, and within that, I'm going to put a header. And inside the header, I'm going to put my navigation that I have on top. So inside the navigation, I'll define a div with class logo. Let's just put the text your company logo over here. And then inside the navigation, after the div, I'm going to put another div, and I'm going to call it with the class top links, right? And now within the top links, I can define 4 links. So for now, the href is going nowhere. About, I'm going to copy this away again, uh, 2 more times. We'll name it portfolio, and then the last one, I'm going to call it contact, right? So now you can see that we have our container, which will contain all the elements in the page, and then within that we have a header, and inside the header we have a navigation. So now let's go ahead and style them a little bit, right? So what I'm going to do, initially I'm gonna style the body. So for the body, I'm gonna go ahead and say margin 0, since by default body has a margin. And then here for the container, I'm gonna say width, and I'm gonna define a fixed width, something like this, 1336 pixel. Bear in mind that this design is not going to be mobile friendly, so it's not responsive, but in later tutorials, we're going to make sure that we have tutorials where we can create this page in a responsive manner, right? So by default, I'm going to put this. You can put any width you want. And then I'm just going to define a mean height of 400 pixel for now. And we'll give it a margin of 0 from top, auto from right, 100 pixel from bottom, and then auto from left as well. So basically, this is going to be making it centered in the page. So if I give it a background of, let's say, CCC now, since I defined it 1336, you'll see that now when I make the page full, this kind of centered the container over here. So let's take it from here. I'm going to remove this. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I just put a border of 1 pixel solid and then CCC so that we kind of see the border. I'm going to switch to this layout so we see it a little bit better. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to style my header. So the header has position relative and then height. Let's give it a height of, by default, let's put it 500 pixel. We always can play with it later. And then I know that in my header I have my nav. So I'm going to set the nav to be having a padding of 20 pixel. And then I'll make sure that the display is flex. And then the justify content is a space between. And you can see that when I define display flex and justify content space between, it's going to arrange its children the way it looks like that. And for the nav, we have one children, which is the logo div, and then another children, which contains all the links that we have, right? So I'm going to style my top links as well. So header, top links, and then A. I'm going to say, let's give them a margin of 20 pixel from right and left. Let's remove the underline from them. So text decoration is none. And let's give them a color of 333, right? Something like this. So now we have like this. I don't like the font, so I'll go to Google Fonts. So I'm going to Google Fonts, search in Google, Google Fonts, and then I'll take a font that I like. You can choose any font you like. I'm going to go ahead and select this Open Sans. So I'll open this here and then make sure that I choose the light and also semi-bold and maybe bold as well. So now here I'm going to in the embed and then select the import and copy this and then paste it over here in my code. So here on top, I'm going to make sure that this is here. And also in the body, I'm defining fold family to be open sans. And then if it wasn't available, use sans serif, right? So now we have a better font over here, which is cool. So next thing I want to do is in the HTML, I want to add a div with class slogan, and that slogan is going to be this box or these elements over here, right? So here I'm going to go inside my header. I'm going to say I want a div with class slogan, and then within that I'm going to create a div title. And for usually I use Visual Studio Code to create lorem ipsum text. So what I usually do, I go to Visual Studio Code and then I create a empty index.html file, and then within that I just type lorem and then press tab. So right now I have like an index.html file over here, and if I just type lorem and press tab, it's gonna autocomplete and give me a long test with lorem ipsum that I can use in my tutorials, right? So for now, I already have those, so I'm going to say, I'm going to choose a, you know, text, lorem ipsum. This will definitely be whatever you want here. I'm gonna indent it a little bit. So we have a div with class title, and then after that, I have a div with class subtitle, just like that. And then I also will copy the text that I have for the subtitle. So usually it's a little bit longer text over here. And then ultimately, I'm gonna have another div after subtitle. So I'm gonna say div, this is for the bottom. So I would put another div and then I'll create another div with class CTA, which is call to action button. And then within that, I'm going to put a button and say join us, right? Just like that. So now I want to style this as well a little bit. So what I can do is I'm going to my CSS. So here I'm gonna make a little bit more room, and then I will say slogan, and then make sure that the position is absolute, and then I will give it a width of 40%, and then I move it a little bit from left by 100 pixel, and then top by maybe 230 pixel, right? So now it's kind of gets positioned over here. So the width is 40% from left of its container, 100 pixel, and from the top of the container is 230. And now I'm going to go ahead and style the elements within that we defined. Title, I'm going to make sure that I give it a very big, font size, something like this, and maybe change the font weight to be light, so 300. So it looks kind of nice. And then I'm going to style my subtitle. So subtitle is going to be font weight, maybe font size, maybe 14 pixel, and then margin top. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a space between title and subtitle, and maybe I give it a color a little bit lighter shade of. Um, yes, great. Now the next thing I want to style is our button. So I'm going to make sure for the CTA, the class, the div with class CTA, I give the same space as the one that we get from subtitle to the title. And then I'm going to style our um, button. So here, let me just correct this. This is CTA. And then here I'll get a background color of maybe something like this, which is a dark blue. I'll make sure that the border is 0. I'll give it a padding of 10 pixel and 30 pixel. And then I'll give it a color of FFF, which is white, and then font size of 16 pixel, and then maybe border radius of 30 pixel. So now it looks nice. So as you can see, our page is kind of getting shaped. Now here, what else we have? We have a sort of a box that contains a picture over here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, and obviously not forgetting that we also have this floating box over here that we scroll down. It kind of, has some sort of a parallax scrolling effect. So, excuse me. So to add that in my HTML, still within our header, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div with class floating box, right? And also for that other image, I'm going to add another div called img box for the image that comes here. So now let's go ahead and style these two boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our floating box. So floating box, and then I'll give it a width of 150 pixel, the same height since it's a box. Make sure that the position absolute so I can freely position it place I want. I'm going to give it a border of 10 pixels solid, and I will choose a lighter color here, the one that we have. So it's going to be this. So now you see that we have our box. The only thing that I want to do now is set a border radius of 2 pixel here, give it a left of minus 100 pixel. So now you can see that it's moved over here. And then finally, I want to use transform, translate 30 pixel, and then rotate 45 degrees. Just a note that when you use these combined transforms like this, that you use two transform styles, the way you read it is from right to left. So first, what really happened here is that we rotated the box 45 degrees and then move it down on the, let me put y-axis here, on the y-axis by 30 degrees, right? So that's the way you read it. So now this is our floating box. The next thing we want to add is the IMG box, right? So let's go ahead and add that as well. So IMG box, I'll give it a width of 50%, height of maybe something like 350 pixel. And then obviously I want to make sure that the position is absolute as well. And let's see what happens if I give the the top 140 pixel. And let's just give it a background to see where it will be. So it's going to be right here, cool. And then I'll make sure that the right is minus 10%. So now you can see that from the right of its container, it moved minus 10% of its parent container width, which is what I want. And then let's make sure, since it's going to have a background, I'm just going to make sure that the background size is maybe 100%, and then background position is center, right? So now let's go ahead and add an image to it. So I already have my images here. The only thing I'm going to do is here, I'm just going to make sure that the IMG box that I added within the header has the background image, URL, and you can use obviously any image that you want. I searched on Google and came up with these images. These are obviously copyrighted. Please don't use them in your commercial project, but for now, it's okay. So now you can see that our page is pretty much taking shape. The only thing that is left here, I'm gonna add a border of let's say 10 pixels solid and the same color that I used for our box over here. So let's just move it here and then choose this color. So now you can see that we kind of have our page getting shaped, right? So the next thing obviously I want to do, now that we have clearly created our headers, I'm now going in our HTML after the header, and I'm going to create a tag main, and this will be the main part of our page and other sections that we have. So I'm going to create a section with the class steps container. So this is going to be this part. So we want to design this part. So now we have our section step container, and then within the step container, what I would like to do is add another div with the class steps. And then finally, within the steps, I'm going to create 3 divs. And starting with the first div, I'm going to have a class icon. So if we look at it here, you can see that we have an icon, we have a title, and a text for each of these 3. So I'm going to create that. So we have an icon, and then later on, we have a div with class title. So I'm just going to add it as well. And then also ultimately we have a div with class text, right? So for the title, I'm gonna use some lorem ipsum text. So I'm just gonna paste it over here, just like that. And then the same thing for the text, but maybe a little bit bigger. So now you can see that I'm adding the text. So now it looks something like this, which is not exactly what we want. Now that I have the text, I'm just gonna copy um, this div, and then we have the other 2 divs. I'm going to remove them and then paste that 2 more times, right? So now you can see that we have something like this. Now the next thing I want to do is to style this a little bit. So the way I do it, let's go to CSS, and here in our CSS I know that we have a section called steps container, and then within that we have steps, and within the steps we have 3 divs, each one having icon, title, and text. So the way I'm going to put it is I'm going to say steps, make sure that the display is flex, so you can see already they're taking shape, and then I make sure that the text align is center, and then justify content space around, and then maybe give it a padding of 0 from top to bottom, and then 30 pixel from right and left. So now you can see that we have something like this, excuse me. So the next step is I want to make sure that now you can see that they kind of overlap and they're very close to each other. So I know that in my steps I have 3 divs, so I'm just going to make steps, and then the divs that I have, the first level divs, let's put them a width of 28%. So by default, they are 100% divided by 3, but I made them so that we can have a little bit of space over here, right? So the next thing I want to do, I want to style the title and the text. So I'm just going to say steps title. Let's give it a font size of 22 pixel, maybe font weight of 300 and give it a margin top of 20 pixel. We haven't put our icons yet, but soon we're gonna do it. Now, the next thing also is gonna be steps and then the text. Just gonna make sure that it has margin top of 20 pixel as well, but we leave the font size the way it is. Now you can see that the space from our header to the main is like 0. So what I can do is, since I know that the section is having class steps container, I'm going to give it a padding top of 140 pixel. So, and also make sure that the height is 300 pixel, right? So I have my steps container. Now it looks better, right? So now that we have this, you can see that our page is kind of taking shape. The next step we have is adding these icons. And these icons are, I just went on, on the net. I'm gonna put all these icons and the link to this prototype anyways, but these icons, basically there are SVG icons that I took um, from the web. So I'm just gonna go ahead and copy them. So in the first step in the icon, I'm going to paste it. So now you can see that I have this one, and then I'm going to do the same for the other ones as well. So I'm going to go down in the icon for the second step here. I'm going to paste that as well. So you can see that we have this one as well. And then I'm going to choose the third one and then paste that as well here in the third icon, like that. And now you can see that we have our icons all set over here, which looks pretty good. You can use obviously any icons you want, and later on in one tutorial, I'm going to show you how to actually create icons or how to convert an SVG to an icon. But for now, I just literally chose to put the actual SVG. As you can see, it has an SVG tag and a bunch of, attributes and to path, for example, here and all that, but we don't bother about them in this tutorial. So we have this section as well, pretty much done. The next thing I want to do is another section. So I'm going to go ahead in my HTML, and then after the first section, I'm going to create another section, uh, and I'm going to give it a class info. And this will be these, you know, this image and the text. So this is going to be the first section, and this is going to be our second info section. So here in my HTML, I have the info, and then what I'm going to do a trick. I'm going to copy the slogan that we already created initially. So you can see that we have this slogan. I'm going to copy this. Uh, Let me just do it correctly. So I have the slogan div all the way here. So this is going to be my slogan all the way here. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in the info section. So when I paste it over here, you can see that it kind of puts it over here because we haven't yet defined the styles for info. So if I go in my CSS and say info position relative, now you can see that it ends up down here, which is exactly what I want. For now, I'm going to go ahead and remove the border from the container. We can add it later. So now you can see that our page is kind of taking shape. We have the um, slogan over here, but also the next thing I want to do is copy the image box that we had on top as well. So here we had this, if I scroll down, I had this IMG box. I can also copy this and put it in the info. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this CTA section. We're not going to have a button there. So we have our slogan, and within that section, I'm going to copy the sort of the image box as well. So if you notice right now, if I scroll down, the image box is obviously not styled. So now let's go ahead and style that section as well. The way I'm going to do it is, if you notice, we have styled our info. So position relative, I'm going to give it a padding of 40 pixel from top and bottom and 0 from left and right. And initially give it a height of 400 pixel, right? Just like that. And then, since we added the info image box over here and also the slogan, I'm going to say info slogan, and then I'll give it a top of 50 pixel, and then left, I'm going to make it auto, and then right 100 pixel. And what it does is that it basically moves our slogan. It overrides the initial properties styles of the slogan that we had in the header. I changed the top to be 50%. I changed the left to be auto, so it can just, come as much as it wants from the left. And I put the right to be 100 pixel. The reason why I set the left auto was because initially slogan, if I scroll up in the slogan section, you can see that it has a left 100 pixel. So I have to actually override it. And by setting it to auto, it means that it will be flexible from the left. And by defining right 100 pixel, it's going to work. The problem now I can see I basically copied this image box here, and the slogan is not really close. So if I do this, now you can see that we have our image box exactly the same place as this one. But now what we want to do, we want to move this one here. So we want to override the styles for the image box, right? So to be able to do that, what I can do is here I say info and then img box. Again, I set the right to be auto, and then I set the left to be minus 10%, and then set the top to be 0, right? So now you can see that I reused our IMG box styles that we defined in the header. So let's go to this view. It's kind of better to see it over here. So I reused this tag, uh, but also I overrode some of the styles so that we changed the placement from right to left, and the same thing for our slogan, right? And obviously you know that you can choose any text that you want in your slogan, right? So we have this now. The next thing I want to do is add the image that we have. So what I can do is maybe signify that I'm having another section here. So I'm just going to call it first info. And then in the CSS, what I can do is come here and say first info and then img box. I'm going to give it a background image URL and choose the image that we had. So I'm just going to copy this image and then paste it over here. So now I hope that we wrote everything correctly. First info img box. I wanted to have a background image with this URL. Let's see why it didn't take effect. So I have span info and we have img box within the section, which is correct. Um, Let me see what's going on here. So we have first info. Okay, I forgot to put S here. So now you can see that we have our second image as well. And the next section is going to be easy as well, because it's basically cloning the first info that we created here, and then again override the slogan and the image. So the way I'm going to do it is after this section, I can add another section with the same info class, but also I can say this one is second info. Now if I inside this, I can basically copy the same slogan that we have. So I'm just going to copy the same slogan and also the same img box and paste it here. So now you can see that we have exactly the same thing here. Now I want to move this around again, and that's so easy. what I can do is instead in my CSS, I can just say, I can style it. So I can say second info slogan. Now I will set the right to be auto and then left to be 50% pixel, right? So this is our slogan, which now is underneath this. Now I need to style our IMG box. So I can say second info IMG box. And then now I set the left to be auto, right to be minus 10%, and then top to be 0. And now here I can just add our background image as well that we have. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy our background image here and paste it here. So now you can see that we also have our background image over here. Let me see if I added by mistake something here. Yes, I added a space. So now you can see that our page is taking shape. So we have, the header, we have here a section that contains our steps, and then we have the first info with the boxes that we have, and the second info with the boxes that we have. Now the next thing we want to do is add this full height picture. That is also pretty easy. Here, what I can do is, let me just increase the height here in my HTML. After the last section that we created, I can add another section. And then here instead, I'm just going to give it a different class, maybe banner IMG. So let's give it a banner IMG class, just like that. So this is pretty nice. And then in the CSS, again, it's very easy. I just need to give it a height. So at the end of the CSS, I'm going to say banner img. Let's give it a height of 400 pixel. It depends on what is the resolution of your image, right? So depending on the resolution and aspect ratio of your image, you need to make sure that you give it a good height. So if the image is sort of square, you want to make sure that you give the height a little bit more than if it's not square or it's rectangle. So now I can set the background size to be 100% and then background position to be center. And then I'm just going to get the background image with the URL. I'm going to copy the URL that I have and then paste it over here, right? Just like that. So now if I scroll down, we can see that we also have our image. So I'm going to save this. Um, so as you can see right now, we have this kind of layout. We have our box. Then we have our images over here and we have the big image. Now what I can do is in the CSS, in the container, I can give it a border. Let's give it a border, 1 pixel solid CCC. And now take a look at this. If I set the overflow to be hidden, I can show you what happens. It kind of chops the areas that are not within the container, which is exactly what I want, so that images are kind of chopped. The next thing to make it much nicer is that I might add in my CSS, I might add a box shadow. So let's say box shadow 0, 0 from X and Y axis, maybe some very big number for the radius, and then RGBA 0, 0, 0 for RGB or red, green, blue, and then maybe 0.2 for the opacity. So now you can see that you have a pretty cool shadow around this area as well, right? So yeah, these are the parts that, I mean, obviously we had another section down here with 3 boxes, but since we're not going to use them for the um, parallax or scroll effects, I'm going to leave it like this. So you could see how I kind of created this layout with the HTML and CSS. Again, this is not the most optimum way of doing that, so I would probably choose different class names or have some sort of a structure for the styles, but this is good enough for the first part of the last episode of parallax scrolling. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you had any questions, please go ahead and ask in the comment section as to why I did some of the stuff. But this was pretty much the fastest way to create this layout. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and share the tutorials. And I wish to see you next time, which is going to be tomorrow, where we actually add the parallax and scrolling effects. Have a good day and night, and goodbye.